form of debt to Barry is he introduced me at an early stage to the work of Carol Dweck, and for that I'm ever grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Barry Hymer.
Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you very much, colleagues. I'm delighted to be speaking about the applications of Professor Dweck's work in the United Kingdom. I did tell Carol yesterday that I do feel she's become an honorary member of our family because my daughters have pretty much grown up with the work of Carol Dweck, and they do now recognize things that I say which lapse from time to time into fixed mindset thinking. Just a few weeks ago, my daughter said to me, once I praised her for something nice she'd done, "Dad, I really don't need your fixed mindset praise." Thanks so much, darling. You won't get it in the future. But we're going to be looking at something that I've done for a number of years now, about 5 years. At the start of many courses, I invite people to reflect on their own lives. Just try and locate something that they have achieved in their own life that they are pleased with, in any domain, no matter how grand or how modest in any respect, and then to reflect on the process by which they achieved it. And I was struck when I first started doing this 5 years ago that people never said that what allowed them to achieve anything was their gift or talent in that domain. And I thought, because I was largely addressing audiences looking at gifted education, that people would say a lot of that: intelligence, my ability, my talent. And then I realized they probably weren't saying that because I was asking this question in Britain. It might be a little bit different in America, but in Britain, for someone to stand up and say, "Barry, what allowed me to achieve my goal was my natural talent in that domain," might present as being a little bit up yourself in a public situation. And so people never did. And I asked them then to do it anonymously, on a little scrap of paper, collected the paper in. Exactly the same responses emerged. Things on that left-hand side. People spoke about dispositions, they spoke about risk-taking, they spoke about openness to experience. Occasionally, they spoke about those things in the middle column, and cheating appeared in Carol's earlier presentation, some honest fixed mindsets perhaps being represented there, and just occasionally people talk about those kinds of things. And it did make me wonder then, does our education system put adequate emphasis on those left-hand column things when actually these things in real life turn out to be far less important? When I do this with children, with young people, and indeed with their parents, exactly the same kind of proportions do apply. A school in Sheffield, a good school, carried out a lovely little study relative to their own experience. And they wanted to just find out what are children's experiences of learning across the school. And they came up after a considerable discussion with 4 questions that they asked all their kids. And the first one was this: what is learning? And the overwhelming response from the majority of children, from reception through to year 6, was it was about performance. Doing well on my stats, getting a good job, and getting it right. Very much those fixed mindset things that Carol was speaking about in her opening presentation. They also asked them, when do you do your best learning? And they said, when I'm basically showing off. When I'm demonstrating my skills, my abilities, my talents, my achievements, when I'm actually presenting as actually being smart. They asked them, what do we do in school that does not help you? And this becomes tragic. When I'm given things to do that are too hard. I'm not someone who's up for a challenge. And the fourth and final question, what does your teacher do that really helps you learn? She tells me what to do when I'm stuck. Wallowing in that helplessness that will not see that child as being the agent of her own learning. Someone out there is going to come to my hand and help me when I'm stuck. And this, for a school which, as I say, is a good school, does make me worry when sometimes I say to people, oh, you know, Carol Dweck's work is all fairly obvious, it's common sense stuff. Everyone in our school's got a growth mindset. That seems not to be the case. It really does seem to be roughly 50-50. And when we put that focus on that search somewhere there in the child's head for ability, we start doing things, particularly in gifted and talented education, which seem to be much more about locating the individual facet, the microchip in that child. and start losing something of the fluidity of the nature of gift creation over time. It's not something which is there through early identification. Find the kids who've got it, do the right things for them, and they'll be the kids who respond in the end. That way we get caught into Merton's cycles of self-fulfilling prophecies, and we start missing out on the kids who might have been, but who hadn't been picked out at that early stage. And the pressures that many of you in schools have been under, to spot them early, catch them and categorize them as those who are our NACTI kids, for those of you who remember the National Academy for Gifted and Talented Youth, and those who are in the naughty box, well, it's a vowel and a consonant between friends. And how many people in our society were in that box when they were young and have gone on to do some pretty special things in their lives subsequently. We know them all now. How few of those lived out the promise that they might have showed in those early stages. For those who might question whether this is indeed borne out by the evidence, some of you will be aware of the study conducted a couple of years ago at York University, which found that fewer than a third of young people identified as gifted and talented in that cohort by the end of Key Stage 2 went on to get their expected 3 or more A grades at A level. And this is in school, let alone in later life. When Andrew Adonis saw this, he threw his hands up in horror and blamed those of you who might be secondary teachers for letting them down. What he didn't pick up on from the same study is that a significant number of those young people who were not considered anywhere near gifted or talented when they were in primary school did go on to get 3 or more A grades at A level. What's changed? Not the child, the context, her motivation, the teacher. I realized when my daughter was making her option choices at GCSE that she wasn't actually choosing her subject, she was trying to choose her bloody teacher. That's where the emphasis was going. She was making predictions. She knew, in a sense, deep down, who was going to be the kind of person who could help her thrive for the next 2 years in that program of study. So what I'd like to suggest, colleagues, seems to be the emerging paradigm, which is built very much on the work of people like Carol Dweck, is that if we can begin to see a movement from this kind of definition, which is our traditional orthodox definition, which is so embedded in the concept of ability, we begin to see an alternative definition possibly yielding greater promise in the longer term. Can we create the conditions in which we help children to choose to invest their time, their energy, their available resources into that area of personal and passion? And though I know I'm not known as a great apologist for many national initiatives over the last 10, 15, 20 years, I am hugely thrilled at the promise being held out very recently, with a long way to go, from some of the titles of some official documentation. The NatStrats document, which someone alerted me to, Louisa, just a few weeks ago. What a title for early years, helping young children to find their passions. What an awesome title from the national strategies. It kind of makes me wish that they were going to be staying around a bit longer than we know they will be. Awesome. And the work of Carol Dweck now suffusing so many of these really potentially inspirational documents. Those of you who are working within the field of inspection will know that the current Ofsted take on things like outstanding is filled with the language of growth mindset thinking. Words like resilience, words like challenge, words like commitment to succeed. It's no longer good enough for us simply to be expert transmitters of knowledge into the minds of young children. Much more that sense of agency. And I'm delighted, colleagues, to be shutting up at this point, because I'm hugely thrilled that a number of people have answered my request to talk about the work they're doing, because I'm a kind of a fraud. I, if you like, spread the message, but the people sitting on this side are the people who go out and do the work in creative ways that leave me flabbergasted. And I've sent out a few kind of requests, and pretty much everyone responded, saying, yes, we'd be delighted to, especially if Carol Dweck is there to see what kind of work we're doing. But for themselves, an opportunity to talk about some of the inspirational work that's going on up and down the country. And I know there'll be others here today who won't even be having that opportunity. But I'd like at this moment to call upon a really good friend and colleague, Marie Huxtable, who is the coordinator of the APEX project in Bath and